Welcome, guys, to another episode with the Doomed Hell. Today we're going to be going through another x79 versus x99 episode. It seems as though you guys really like this series overall. I mean, obviously I'm not getting as many views as the first episodes, but I don't really care. Kind of doing this for my own fun, and I am learning through the process of basically trial and error. Today I was basically searching for x79 motherboards which had Thunderbolt, which is an extreme rarity, and we'll get into that in a sec. And I stumbled upon a concept motherboard, which I thought was extremely interesting, considering it has better specs than 99% of motherboards today. This is the Asus x79 Deluxe Zeus. And the Zeus is effectively if you took the Rampage for Extreme Black Edition and you ramped it up to 25, because this thing has pretty much everything you might want out of it. It has well, let's start with the things it has that you might expect from a board of its age. It is a board from 2012, very first generation x79, and they were already pushing these things. So it has relatively good VRMs, but the number one thing you'll notice is that it has heat sinks where you might find PCIe lanes, and usually I would say that this is really bad, because obviously you need PCIe lanes when you have a motherboard, and you need a lot of them if we're talking about workstation users. But this motherboard kind of goes against conventionality. This is the very first motherboard where you have an onboard full-fledged graphics card, but not just any graphics card. It has a dual GPU setup, a crossfire dual GPU setup on the board. And not only that, but it has the VRMs, it has the heatsink, it has everything you might need while running these graphics cards. So that's a very big game changer, and there's a lot of different advantages that you might have with that. For one, this means that you basically clear up a lot of the space in your computer. You only really have one motherboard. You have one motherboard and you have nothing attached to it, and that's pretty damn cool. The VRM heatsink also looks very beefy, which means that ultimately you get decent amounts of you probably have decent amounts of performance under there. I would assume it's probably either 7970s or 6970s. Either way, you are getting quite a bit of bang for buck. And the CPU VRMs are definitely nothing to scoff at as well. Very, very powerful. Looking at the I/O as well, we have plenty of USBs, a lot of USB 3s. We do have Wi-Fi. It seems as though we have basic gigabit Ethernet from back in the day. I wonder if we have onboard sound. We might. We definitely have it through the Radeon cards, that's for sure. And another really cool feature is you have two Thunderbolt 2 ports. And the reason why I was talking about Thunderbolt 2 earlier is that way back when this board was announced, basically it was impossible for x79 to get Thunderbolt, as one of the requirements for Thunderbolt to function was onboard video. And so this board is interesting because it has onboard video through the integrated graphics, which allows it to have Thunderbolt. So it's the only x79 motherboard that has Thunderbolt because of that. Another cool, interesting fact is that this board is one of the only boards on x79 which had full-fledged 10 SATA 6 gigabit per second ports, which is very cool. Ultimately, this board is extremely impressive how it is built. It does have a deluxe aesthetic over the Rampage, ROG, or the Sabertooth aesthetics, which existed back then. And I think that's a very good thing, because this isn't really a board for everyone, and it especially for LN2 overclockers, this is not a good idea. This is more of a board for those who need a all-in-one solution. And I think this is kind of, talking about in one of my previous episodes, a solution for those who are looking for like a very cramped cramped performance. And this is kind of the bridge between a desktop workstation computer and say a console. As everything is connected together, this is much better for drivers, for instance, and it makes the task easier for Asus to basically have all the drivers set up. However, why did this never come out? Looking at this board, why did we see it and it just never really came out? And there's a lot of reasons for that. All of them are disadvantages of this board. Now, for one, you don't get any PCIe lanes, and that's probably the number one thing workstation users need and want, are PCIe lanes. When getting x79, one of the only reasons why people bought x79 was that you were getting so many PCIe lanes. At the time, a lot of people really liked expansion slots. This was a time when sound cards were important to basically everyone. Nowadays, it's just niche markets, and of course myself. Back then, also, it was really important that you were able to get crossfire SLI, quadfire SLI setups, due to the fact that, well, a lot of workstation users were trying to were animators or 3D renderers, or they really needed those graphics cards, multiple graphics cards on one board, and this is just not the case. You get what you get, and honestly, this is probably a bad board, purchasing it like maybe 5 years after release, considering that you would probably be limited to Asus drivers, so hoping that Asus does a good job, and obviously the Radeon cards which are on the board. And if they're 6970s, that's going to be a pain in the ass. If they're 7970s, you're still not going to get all that much performance nowadays. And considering that Crossfire for gamers is becoming less and less useful, this board really only panders to people that like motherboards and nothing else. So I do understand why it never got released. And I do understand why we got the Deluxe, the x79 Deluxe instead, which is also a really good board though, that I wish I could talk about a little bit. The Deluxe is a first gen x79 board, which means that it doesn't really have all that many PCIe slots as you might want. It's not really set up for SLI. It's not the lanes are not really the lanes are not really split enough to run SLI. It doesn't really have all that many USB 3.0 ports. It does have a lot of front USB 2.0s, and it also has a lot of SATA ports, although most of them are, of course, 3.0s. It's not a bad board. It's not the best board. It's probably a mid-range board at best, and the Zeus was probably supposed to be the very high end. Now, ultimately, I don't really care for these boards. What I think would have been really cool is if NVIDIA or AMD started making chipsets where they included onboard video. And the reality is that they never really had to do that, because obviously most people don't care for Thunderbolt, and Thunderbolt standards made it so that ports that don't have onboard video can now have Thunderbolt. So none of this really had to stem the way I wish it was, and it stemmed in a way that was actually much cheaper for consumers, which is great. So hope you guys enjoyed this episode. I do love these kinds of motherboards, and I hope in the future I get to check some out. So have a good day.